On today's episode of the Sports Card Dad, looks like Al fell off the couch, we'll have to fix that, an important discussion between Dr. Beckett and star basketball guys. This is going to be good. Stick around. What's going on, sports card hobby family? Back again. It's another day. It's another sports card video. A couple weeks out from football season, my friends. Who's ready? I know that I'm ready for my mediocre Saints to take the field. Hopefully they shock the world. But there's some things that we have to worry about, I think, as a Saints fan. That's probably every year. Before I get started, today's important, very important discussion. Huge thanks to our Tuesday shoutouts, justcollect.com. You've got a collection to sell. You don't know who to contact. Easy appraisal form on the justcollect.com website. Make sure to check them out to figure out what your collection is worth. Card Capsule. You want supplies and cases, but you don't want to spend a fortune. You want quality stuff. And frankly, you deserve 10% off. Sports Card Dad code gives you 10% off over on Card Capsule. Wooten Sports Cards over on Whatnot. The singles magician over there. If you just want to have a good time buying singles, check out Wooten Sports Cards. He sells out just about every week. So don't wait. Make sure that you're paying attention to when his shows are going on. 13,000 followers, 5-star reviews, Wooten Sports Cards on Whatnot. All right, what I would consider to be one of the more important discussions, hobby discussions in recent memory, and I think I want to preface this conversation because there is so much content and focus around the hobby gambling side of things. My God, if you go, whether it's IG or YouTube, it's we're breaking this and we're pulling this. We got razzes and we got duck races and we're at the fair and we're shooting baskets to try to win something. There's so much heavy focus on this sort of stuff, which granted, look, I know a lot of people are having fun with it, so I don't want to take away the joy. But man, when there's actually real hobby history discussions going on, I would just hope that people would pay attention, especially those in the social media space that spout off about these particular cards that we're going to talk about without doing any sort of research whatsoever. And for those that might be new to the hobby, maybe don't know what I'm talking about, Dr. Jim Beckett, one of the more legendary hobby participants, owned Beckett magazine going back to the 1980s and beyond. This publication, while yes, it had an effect on baseball cards, man, it really kickstarted the interest in football and basketball cards in particular. A lot of folks just didn't really care a whole lot about basketball cards, hence why the Star Basketball Company got the license for 3 full years for, I think, $10,000 is what the founder, Robert Levine, got it for. 10 grand. And I understand, that maybe that was a lot of money in the 80s, but compare that, to what folks are paying. What's Fanatics paying to get a license these days? So that was how little people cared about basketball cards. Now, granted, it was 1990 before the Beckett magazine came out. So Beckett magazine didn't kickstart this thing. A guy named Michael Jordan and David Robinson and a lot of these guys coming up, a lot of these amazing players in the 80s, they got the fire rolling in the game of basketball. But basketball card values and people paying more close attention to what stuff was worth. What were the important cards? What are the rookie cards? What are the, all that stuff? It was thanks to Beckett magazine. I give Dr. Beckett a ton of credit. He didn't have to do this call. And essentially, this is a 2-hour conversation. This is a part 1 that came out on the Sports Card Insights podcast. I didn't see it hit YouTube yet, but that's Dr. Beckett's podcast. He also filters it over to YouTube. So make sure that if you haven't already, make sure to check out. This is a hobby legend that speaks on the hobby, and it's very important, I think, for everyone. Whether you agree, disagree with what he has to say, he's been there and done that, and it's an important voice that we have at our disposal. So I'm always paying attention when Dr. Beckett has something to say. I, of course, am a Star basketball card fan. I've got a copy of the 195 and the 288. and I'm trying to get that Court Kings card to kind of round out the 4 main kind of rookie year star cards for Jordan. And so I have an interest. I also, by the way, for all the Fleer folks out there, I love the 86 Fleer card. I want a copy of that card as well. I just treat that card as kind of more of a common vintage card where it's just more about getting the right copy for me. But I will own that card. And I will say again, as I've said on many videos on this subject, the 86 Fleer Jordan, it is the most iconic Jordan card. One of the most iconic hobby cards of all time. So it's not taking away from that Jordan card. It is an amazing card. And that 86 Fleer set is an iconic set overall. So this is, I know a lot of people, it's a versus thing, and I understand that, you know, Star versus Fleer. Both of these cards are incredible. I want to own the Fleer as well. The reasoning, and again, I got into this, why I felt like I needed to get the Star first, is the limited supply of the cards in comparison to the 86 Fleer. And it was a concern, which was a valid one, as we've seen here over the last 90 days or so, that these could just get out of my price range, and then I can never get a copy of these cards. And that is essentially what has happened. And they weren't inexpensive to begin with. So, and actually, let's just start off with that. I'm looking right here at Beckett Basketball Magazine number 2. I was trying to find my number 1 issue that's got Michael Jordan on the cover. I could not find it. But right away, I just want to point out, I want to give Dr. Beckett credit, because he does have, first off, he does have 84-85 Star in the Beckett magazine. And if you look at the price points, he's got a high quality copy of the 101 card, the Jordan 101 card, at $350 in comparison to the 86 Fleer number 57 in a high grade. It's $225. I say high grade, but this predates grading. 1990, PSA started in 1991, so this is just as PSA is opening its doors and getting started. So we're talking $225 compared to $350. There was a respect there for the card going back to 1990 from a pricing standpoint. I mean, really, the 86 Fleer 57 was more on par from a price point with this card, the Olympic card, listed at $200 compared to $225 for the 86 Fleer. There was a healthy respect back then from Beckett. And so that's why I say this was not a versus thing. Dr. Beckett, and he says in this interview, please watch this, it's 25 minutes. It's a part 1 of this conversation. And this is between Dr. Beckett, Steve Taft, who's one of the original dealers, and Steve was one of the ones that was helping Beckett grading to grade these cards, how to look for fakes, what to understand about, you know, these particular sets. So he assisted Beckett grading going back, because PSA did start to grade the Star cards early on, but then didn't feel comfortable. There was, you know, different counterfeits in the second year cards and so forth. And so PSA was like, you know what, we're not going to grade these. Of course, Nat Turner took over, and 2.5 years ago or so, he says, hey, we're going to grade Star cards. And it was Steve Taft, this guy that's in this conversation, that helped guide PSA and kind of consulted with them as to what to look for to get them on track, you know, to be able to grade Star cards now. Also in this conversation is Ryan from 80 Star Basketball YouTube channel. Make sure to check out this channel. Again, it's just about learning. It's just about learning about Star basketball sets in general. He also does follow auctions and that sort of thing. So it's just interesting content to take. And then Dave D is on this call as well. And he's a big collector dealer of Star basketball cards. He is the owner of 2 out of the 3 PSA 9 copies of the 101 card. To me, this was a fascinating conversation. And like I said, there's a lot of content around, you know, the gambling side and the break and the big pull and this or that. We'll actually talk more about that in tomorrow's video. But rarely do you see the guys that were in the room at the time, the guys making those big decisions. And Dr. Beckett does say in this conversation, going back, I mean, he was the judge when it came down to what's a rookie card, what's an XRC. He had to make really tough calls. He says here in this conversation, he was attempting to bring order to a chaotic hobby. You know, a lot of back and forth and discussion and debate. The idea of Beckett Magazine, of course, to bring a price guide, to help bring some sort of a guide to help people make better buying decisions, but then also to help distinguish cards from one another. And so he played a very important role. He is kind of one of the original hobby influencers, if you will, going back to the 80s. And he would probably concede that that was a blessing and a curse at times. You know, but I give him a ton of credit for getting in, and this was a debate. It was kind of a working conversation, as Ryan alluded to in some of his videos, but this was not fluff talk. They were going back and forth. There was some difference of opinion, but it was excellent how they handled themselves. Again, I need to give Dr. Beckett a lot of credit for getting in the room with 3-star guys. It's like, what does he have to gain from this, now? But it was more just about intellectual conversation. They agreed on some things, they disagreed on other things. So I'm really excited to see, hopefully there's a part 2 and a part 3 and all of that stuff. But it was just an excellent hobby conversation. So make sure, I'll put the link down below to the podcast/video for this, because it's a can't miss. If you're interested in cards, you're not just interested in, the latest break pull, you've got to check this out. One really interesting tidbit that I pulled from this conversation too is Dr. Beckett said, hey, look, we had these asterisks next to the RC. I'm actually pointing to the 57 Fleer here, the 86 Fleer, the Jordan, and it's not just Jordan's card, it's a bunch of different cards from 86 Fleer. There's an asterisk next to the RC, and this is something that I remember as a kid not knowing, like, why is there an asterisk next to this card? And essentially what Beckett says here in this conversation is that we have it labeled as a rookie card, but the asterisk is to look deeper, look further. There are cards that predate this card. So we are labeling it as an RC, but understanding that there is an asterisk here next to the RC, which I never, and again, as an adult, haven't looked at a Beckett magazine in a while, went back and was like, oh yeah, that's right. There was this asterisk next to the RC, not really understanding what that meant at the time. But even more interesting is he said that there was some sort of kind of a printing issue as time went on. And they said, hey, look, we can't do the asterisks anymore in the Beckett magazine. So I don't know when that changed. Again, this is number 2, issue number 2 from 1990. Was it 1992 or 3 or 91? I'm not sure. But basically, the asterisks went away. So if you're somebody that was buying, I don't know, Beckett magazine number 50, and you're looking at the price guide and there's no asterisk next to it, and so then it always stayed with no asterisk. And isn't that kind of amazing that a little asterisk can have the context? The context is everything with any, the devil's in the details. A little asterisk can make all the difference, because the asterisk there, it's kind of like, oh, this person won XYZ championships, but put an asterisk next to it. And again, it's not taking away from the 86 Fleer card, but Beckett was essentially saying here, he was putting a note in to keep looking. There are other Jordan cards. There's Jordan cards that predate that 86 Fleer card. He also did say that, look, what really drove a lot of Beckett magazine going back was opinions from dealers and from shops. They were the lifeblood of the hobby. So keep in mind, he's taking feedback from dealers and stores. And I think he said something like there was 20,000 stores. I might have that number wrong. But anyway, a ton of card stores. And I remember this going back to when I was a kid. It felt like there was 3 or 4 different card stores in a relatively small town. I was in Panama City, Florida. There was quite a few card stores. It wasn't that big of a place to have many card stores. So I can only imagine as you got into the bigger cities what that looked like. So again, this is a very important conversation. This is kind of part 1. Then there's more that they dive into. I don't want to ruin all of it, but there was some little nuggets there that I thought that were really interesting and worth a look. If you have, just an interest in why cards are what they are, how did they get the prestige they are? Do you have an interest in these, these hobby stories, and why are things the way that they are? It's kind of like the legend of the 52 Topps Mantle card, and they dumped millions of copies into the Hudson River or whatever that story is. And so that card is short printed. These hobby kind of legends, these stories, I think are extremely important to the overall fabric of the thing. So excellent conversation. I will put a link down below to check it out. Please do. And then also I want to round out the video. We have got a new partnership with PSA. They've got their PSA store on eBay. I don't know if people realize this, but you can grade with PSA and then put it up for auction on eBay without ever touching the cards. It makes it very easy. It's auction only. I do have a link down below for the eBay store that'll just take you right there to the PSA eBay store so that you can check out the items. Over 20,000 items there, and they're all running at auction. So it's not as if you're going to show up and there's a million things that are at buy it now that are way overpriced. They're all sitting at auction there. There's probably some deals, I guess is the main point. So make sure to check out the PSA store on eBay. And then also for first-time submitters, I've got that promo code that I've been sharing. CD25 gives you $25 off your first grading order with PSA. 1 card minimum. So it's not as if you need to have a huge order. There's not a huge minimum. 1 card minimum, $25 off your first submission at PSA with SCD25 code at the billing and shipping part of the checkout. All right, let's look at a couple cards. We were talking about Star. Now, this one they've got listed. I will say, too, you don't have to set it at like 99-cent auction and have it run. You can set this at different price points as evidenced here. 85, 86 Star. This is an amazing card. This is a second-year Slam Dunk Contest Star card. BGS 95, so an incredibly nice copy of this card. And it's sitting there with a huge, they've got a huge offer there. The first bid, I think, is at like $9,000 or something. So shooting for the stars a little bit there. Shooting for the stars, pun intended, on that particular card. It is a beautiful card. It's one of the more popular Star picture cards. He's doing that sideways dunk, and it's just fantastic from the Slam Dunk Contest going back to the mid-'80s. I also pulled an example of a Tom Brady card because of some of the recent social media stuff with Captain 37 and Tom Brady's conversation. This is a 2008 playoff National Treasures Brady auto. But check out this autograph, 2008. So remember when he was talking to Kevin, to Captain 37, and he said, when I do my B, I kind of wanted it to look like a 1 and a 2 for his jersey number. And you can see it plain as day in this card, where the B, if you kind of look down at that B, it's clearly a 1 and a 2. Really interesting. And so this card's sitting, I think it's got 6 days left, about $1,000 currently. So guys, check out the PSA store on eBay and take advantage if you've never submitted with them before. $25 off with the SCD25 code. My friends, have an amazing day ahead. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.